All right, I just received confirmation. We are now live. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our May 9th, June 9th City Council meeting. So let's open the meeting and start with a roll call of the City Council. So, Madam City Clerk,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor John Caposcia,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi,
Present.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Here.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum and may conduct city business.
Okay, thank you very much. I do want to just remind everybody that you can participate in the meeting. If you would like to participate, you can call in. The number is 669-900-9128. And just when we get to a topic, call in at that time and you'll be in the queue and ready to go when we call for comment on a specific item. If you want to talk about just an item that is not on the agenda, just please call in now and we will get to you real quick. And any item on the consent calendar too, please call in now because we'll handle the general comments as well as comments on the consent calendar at the same time. So I'll call for open comment right before we get to the consent calendar, okay? So with that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. So James, do you have a flag to put up? I have one in the background here, if we see it. We want to use that. So just like to ask everybody to mute your flag and stand, or mute your mic and stand, and I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under all, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Those of you in the audience, please have a seat. And just for inspiration, I just have a few words. You know, it's been a really difficult week with the events that have unfolded with the brutality of George Floyd by the individuals on the Minneapolis Police Department. So I just want to say a couple of things. You know, we had a rally here in Sierra Madre and somebody was handing out three things that had three things to just think about. And one is to listen to Black people. And, you know, when I thought about that a lot, we all look at the world and things happening in the world, and we all have opinions about the answer. But one thing is we all don't really know what we don't know. And so I think that one is just really appropriate, especially us here in Sierra Madre. Sierra Madre is very heavily white, I would say. We're not really that ethnically diverse, and we're pretty well off here. And it's just my opinion. I'm certainly not here to tell anybody what to do or think, but I think it's appropriate that we all just listen a little bit more and not to jump to conclusions about what the root cause of this problem is, and just think a little bit deeply about what folks are saying about it. The other one was to say, when you see racism, call it out and don't tolerate it. And we've all done that before where, you know, we're with a bunch of people and somebody might say something and we'll chuckle even though it makes us a little uncomfortable. But I think it's time that we all just call it out when we see it and identify it for what it is. The third thing on the flyer was police reform. And again, I've said it, I'm very proud of our police in Sierra Madre, but still we can all do better. And it is horrifying what we hear about and saw on television all week with some of the brutality that went on in just responding to some of the protests. Police are in a really, really difficult position, but I think we all just need to think a little bit deeper about the communities we serve and what the police role in that. Then the one thing that wasn't on there in my comments to the audience was the other thing that we need to be very concerned about is our criminal justice system. And I believe there are 400,000 people that are incarcerated in the United States right now for the inability to pay bail. Now, that has a lot of events unfold from that. And when you're in jail for months because you haven't even been convicted of a crime, you've just been accused and arrested of something, and you can't get out to go to your job or take care of your family, then you get thrust into the plea bargain situation where 95% of cases in the United States, criminal cases, are settled via plea bargain. And if you can't get out of jail because you can't make bail, you're afraid of a trial because of the uncertain outcome and maybe going to prison for 5 to 10 years, you plea bargain yourself into being branded a criminal. And some of these things are the root cause of what we're dealing with and why there is such a deep disparity between income of people of color and just poor people in their response to the criminal justice system. So one thing I said, it wasn't my word, but there was a police chief or somebody that said, and then Governor Newsom picked up on that and said it the next day, but he said the criminal justice system works far better for the guilty, well-to-do than it does for the innocent poor. So just some things to think about. And with that, I would like to honor Deb Sheridan's suggestion that we just take a moment of silence in remembrance of what happened to George Floyd, and just hope and pray that we never witness something like that again. So with that, can we just have a moment of silence, please? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, approval of the meeting agenda. Any suggested changes to the agenda?
I'll move for approval as is.
Did you
Second.
second, Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Okay, with that, can we have a roll call, Madam City Clerk?
Yes, thank you. Mayor John Caposcia,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi,
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Aye.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Yes.
The motion to approve the agenda as presented was passed by unanimous vote.
Okay, approval of meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any comments on that? I don't have any. So with that, can we have the roll call, Madam City Clerk?
Yes, thank you. Mayor John Caposcia,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi,
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Aye.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 26, 2020 as presented was passed by unanimous vote.
Okay, Mayor and City Council reports, and folks, if you remember me, I'd like to just go first with this one and continue a little bit of discussion about the events of the week. We did have a very nice rally here in Sierra Madre, and it really was beautiful and moving. And I don't know how many people were there. I estimated about 200 to 250. Somebody else on Facebook said about 300. Somebody said 500, probably wasn't that many, but it was a substantial crowd. And I was just incredibly impressed and moved by what I saw there. Number one, to see that Sierra Madreans to step up and organize this thing was really courageous, especially when we saw, some of the nasty things that happened with some of the rallies and protests in other cities, that for somebody to feel so strongly about this and actually organize a rally here in Sierra Madre, I think I use the word courageous because I just want to say Ariana Real is her name. And I would just say she's more courageous than me because I didn't want to do it because I was just afraid of the impact of what was going to happen if something went wrong with this. But at the end of it, I mean, Sierra Madre was just absolutely, very energetic and positive. And I was really impressed that everybody was wearing masks. And that just shows how Sierra Madre, we care about each other. And just for all the people that came in from out of town, how they were so respectful. So it was a beautiful thing, and it was really an example of how to conduct a peaceful rally that I believe was influential. I mean, it certainly made an impact on me, and I'm sure it made an impact on everybody who was watching. So I just want to say I'm really proud of Sierra Madre and the people that organized the protest, not say protest, but rally. And I just again want to give a shout out to our police department. Our new chief was there, and it was just impressive watching him kind of work the crowd and talk to people. And I really think he's an inspiration for the concept of community policing. And I just think, our city manager just made a great choice in selecting him as our police chief. And I believe there's going to be a lot of good things happening as a result of his hire. And again, the police department, our guys are great, men and women of the department. And every encounter I've had with them all week over some of the traffic problems, it was just really impressive to see how they deal with the people that encounter them. And some were really ticked off that they could not ride their bike up to Chantry Flats. And just to see how our officers, just were very calm and just firm and just tell them that they just can't let them do it. They're sorry. It was very impressive. So I'm very proud of Sierra Madre. So thank you, everybody who attended that rally. So who else would like to make comments?
I'll go next, and I'll just build off of that. I just want to thank you, Mayor, for being there for all of us who couldn't be there. And I think the reception and what we all heard was extremely positive. Your words, everyone that was there, just how professional everyone was. So I think that you hit the nail on the head. And Sierra Madre is and continues to be a place where everyone should feel welcome, no matter the color of your skin, your race, your creed, your ethnicity, who you are, what you believe. We should all feel comfortable with anyone being here in Sierra Madre, and vice versa. And I think that event was really heartwarming for everyone to see. So thank you so much for being there for all of us. And I think that this is it's a tremendously confusing time for, I think, all of us. I think that in a way we see our country seemingly being ripped apart, but at the same time, coming together in ways that we have never seen before, at least not in modern history, of communities of all different walks of life, age, race, ethnicity, gender, coming together with common cause, like in that event in Sierra Madre, in support of Black lives and communities of color. So I think that this is a hard time for everyone, and I think that we as a council, and specifically as a council member, I feel like my job is, as the mayor said, his first point was to listen, and I hope that anyone here in Sierra Madre feels that if they need someone to talk to, anyone in a position of leadership in Sierra Madre, they should feel free to reach out to me. And I'm sure my fellow council members feel the same way, to hear and to listen about anything that we in the city can do better to make Sierra Madre even stronger, to make San Gabriel Valley generally stronger on race relations, on tolerance, anti-discrimination, et cetera. And as the mayor pointed, criminal justice reform, police reform, and keeping our communities safe. So kudos to the mayor, kudos to Chief Armelin and the city manager for just overseeing such a wonderful event. It was also National Gun Violence Awareness Day on June 5th. And so that sort of got overshadowed, or maybe amplified, depending on who you ask, with all the other events. But this is, I think, technically National Gun Violence Awareness Week, which I think we are seeing gun violence at heighten and becoming more and more of an issue because of the demonstrations and the rallies, and those who may disagree with it actually bearing arms and threatening people with gun violence. And I think it's just important to continue to be vigilant in seeking a society where we all, and our kids specifically, and our next generation, don't have to worry about gun violence and don't have to worry about on a daily basis whether their life is going to be in danger because someone decides to use a gun. And so I think that we all, and Sierra Madre has been very strong on gun violence prevention, and we will continue to be. But I wanted to make sure that we as a community kept that in mind during this time. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll go. First, I want to thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for representing the council the way you did. I got to see the tape of your speech, and I thought it was eloquent and is just right. And I am proud of the city. I think we came together in a way that was a model for the rest of the country. I want to give kudos to our city manager, our police chief, all our public safety officers. You didn't even know they were there, but they were there just in case, and they did a fantastic job. And so it's obviously we're just a little tiny little piece of a big national puzzle. It's, I think, going to take a long time to work out, but I see some hope on the horizon. I see some challenges as well, but I think we showed them how to do it here. And I think there's a lot of, I think things take time, right? Things take time, but I think maybe a kernel has been planted and maybe something will grow out of it. So again, thank you to all who are involved, and to Miss Real, who organized the event. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. That was a very courageous thing for her to do.
I don't think I can add too much as to what my colleagues had shared about the rally, the vigil, however we had phrased that. I just want to share, I'm really thankful that our police department was able to stand side by side with not just our residents, but other people that were there assembling, and were able to keep it peaceful. I know for myself, there were a lot of emails that I received about the concern as to what it could bring to our city, and we were able to show that we can still feel passionately about an issue and do it peacefully. Just two other quick things. I wanted to thank our city staff for the signage that's been put up in town. As we're slowly reopening, I know there were concerns also about that, and we're going to continue patrolling from our police department, and hopefully continue to encourage using masks and keeping physically distanced apart. But the signage really makes a great difference on the, whether it's the banners, whether it's even on the trails. I've learned from some of the folks that are there regularly that the signage has helped there. And then also too, as we open some of the dining areas and encouraging masks and again, physical distancing, I should say. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is Quarantine Canteen was the last week, last Wednesday. It was 2.5 months of support from Sierra Madre Thrives. And I think all of you know through the announcement of Mountain View News, the Comers and the Denizens will be our grand marshals for a parade we hope to have. But if anything in name, we're really excited to name them as the grand marshals. But just a couple of stats about Quarantine Canteen, including last week's meal. Now we have served over 4,500 meals. And I'm saying we just because I was able to volunteer maybe for about 6 of those. But I should say Quarantine Canteen, Sierra Madre Thrives, has been able to serve 4,500 meals. They raised over $55,000 for local businesses, and they were able to support local business owners through that process. So big kudos to the team there. And, people were asking, are we going to continue to do this? Is there going to be another drive-through? I know it'll take a lot of arm twisting with the Comers and the Denizens to do it, but I know they were happy to do it in the last 2.5 months. So thank you to them.
Okay, and again, thank you. I mean, that's really great that you were able to participate and represent the city on that team as well. Very, very impressive. None of our restaurants have gone out of business. I know we've lost, I think, a couple of other businesses, but they're all still going. And nationwide, I heard some statistics that 25% of restaurants are going to fold up or something. Well, I just don't want to see not one of them lose their business here in Sierra Madre. So.
And Mayor, can I just add on, just because of you pointed me out, I really want to point out and thank Clarissa Lowe and Lauren Hines. They were there every single Quarantine Canteen working, and it was great to have city staff support also.
And for the public that's watching, I apologize, but I mean, there's so many people to thank here. And I just also want to just all of our city staff. I mean, they've been through a miserable, time with this COVID. And I think, they're all working behind the scenes, but the pressure has been on everybody here. And I just want to thank you all personally. The fire department too, they've been under a lot of pressure here with all this going on. So everybody has just stepped up. And this is, again, all these things, what makes Sierra Madre so great. So thanks to everybody. It's just hard to point out everybody that's really stepped up here. So, okay, so we'll move on. Okay, now is the time for public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. And if you have any comments on anything on the consent calendar, we'll hear those as well. So I will pause for a minute while we'll let people call in if they haven't already. And I'm going to step away and fill my water glass.
Mayor and members of the City Council, this is Laura Aguilar, Assistant City Clerk. The city did receive 5 emailed public comments for tonight's council meeting. We received public comment from Deb Sheridan, from Marianne Shinnick, from Josefina Riley, from Margaret Fullenwider, and we've also received public comment from Cheryl Sapola. All 5 emails were forwarded to the city council meeting in advance of the council meeting. Excuse me, they were forwarded to the city council in advance of the meeting, and they will be entered into public record.
So Ms. Aguilar, did you read out the topics of those comments? Sorry, I stepped away.
All 5 topics were on items not on the agenda, and they were general comments related to various topics, and those emails were forwarded to the city council.
Okay, so most of them were related to the problems we've had with the Chantry Flat closures, and one other was, one of them was just a request that we have the moment of silence, and the other one was regarding a dispute over a planning commission decision on Santa Anita, correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay, all right, so they're all acknowledged, we've read them all, and they are part of the record. So has anybody called in to provide comment?
Mr. Mayor, there are 4 people waiting to provide public comment, so I'll start letting them in now.
Okay, so yeah, please. And again, because of the delay, if you've got, mute your sound, and I won't be responding to any particular comment. I'll just say thank you. You probably won't even hear me. But if there are questions that will inform our discussion, we may answer those questions at the end after we've heard all the comments. So let's go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, caller. We are currently taking public comment on items not on the agenda. If you are listening to the meeting live, please mute your feed to avoid feedback. You will have 3 minutes to provide your comment. You may proceed. Good afternoon, caller. You may provide your comment.
Hello? Oh, am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Oh, okay. Hi. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Bob Neidham. I'm a resident here in Sierra Madre. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and the City Clerk for having me here. I want to comment on the approvals, the conditional approvals for Alverno Heights Academy to expand their campus population from an all-girls high school to add a co-ed K-8 after-school daycare and a pre-K program in fall of 2020. My family's been residents of Sierra Madre since '03, and we live on Wilson Street across from Alverno. Our family supports Alverno. I'm all for the all-girls high school, but I'm not for a rush job to start a co-ed K-8 after-school daycare, summer school, pre-K expansion in temporary trailers without any public hearing, without a noise study, without prior notification to the neighbors, and what I think is in violation of the master plan. I've spoken to parents and students at the school. I've done a Zoom call with the head of the school and the board chair at Alverno. I've talked to neighbors. I've talked to other folks in Sierra Madre about this issue. So I'm pretty well informed. The first thing I'm asking for is I want to request a formal public hearing before any approvals are granted for fall of 2020. Vincent Gonzalez has been nothing but professional and helpful. He stated in an email, the public hearing will be scheduled once Alverno submits the application for the master plan amendment, but such date shall not exceed May 13, 2021. It does not make common sense to allow this significant expansion without any formal public hearing or notification and delaying an application for amendment to the master plan and public comment until 2021. Two, I'm requesting the current master plan be amended to explicitly approve the addition of co-ed K-8, after-school daycare, summer school, pre-K, student demographics prior to any approvals being granted and prior to fall of 2020 starting. As stated by the city planner, the proposed school will have no more than 400 students as allowed in the master plan. The master plan is explicit that it shall not exceed 400 students, but what was excluded is only in an all-girls high school. I disagree with the interpretation that a 400 student maximum includes any age and gender when the master plan explicitly and only approves an all-girls high school. Three, I'm requesting a noise study be conducted prior to expansion of fall in 2020. The city is allowing Alverno to conduct a noise study in fall when school begins because of the pandemic. To allow the expansion to begin without a noise study is a direct violation by the city and Alverno of the approval process and does not take into account the difference between noise in a high school as opposed to an elementary school. I worked with elementary school students and they create a whole different kind of noise. Four, I request the city rescind the approval of temporary trailers as it violates the city building code. The temporary approval of trailers to be used for classrooms for 2 years violates the city code. The city code remains silent on the use of trailers in the city outside of construction trailers for short-term use. The code is silent because it is not allowed. I want the school to build beautiful, tasteful, permanent construction in a thoughtful, well-planned manner. I respectfully request the council addresses the specific requests for a formal public hearing, a noise study, amendment to the master plan, and the use of temporary trailers prior to granting approvals and prior to opening in the fall of 2020. On a gut level, this just doesn't feel right. I'm not against the co-ed K-8 program. I just want it to be thoughtful and done well. The process feels rushed. The process feels opaque and exclusive. The process feels like it will lower my home value and the quality of life in my little neighborhood. And the awkward optics between two schools in town feels very uncomfortable. The whole process just feels wrong right now. Let's work together to make this right and a beautiful, productive, well thought out addition to our city. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, caller. We are currently discussing items not on the agenda. If you are listening to our meeting live, please mute your feed to avoid feedback. You will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comment. You may proceed. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you are currently live for public comment. You may proceed.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Mayor and council members. This is my first time attending.
We're getting a lot of feedback from your end. You might want to mute your TV so that the council can hear your comment.
Yeah,
Okay,
please,
sorry about that. Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of attention from the chief and the mayor, and I'm really grateful for that. I've actually completed a petition of almost 1,000 folks broadly, and I understand that about 100 or so of them are local to the area of Liliano, Santa Anita, Arno, and a few other streets around here. And our concern is really the amount, the amount of traffic of the cars coming by. And I understand there's been a police stationed and there's been a lot of actions taken, but there's still a problem that's occurring both on weekdays and on weekends, with cars flying down our streets, trespassers, trash, loitering, and the newest one as of last weekend is heckling of myself and my 2-year-old daughter, which you can probably hear in the background, unfortunately. I'm sorry. So really, we're just concerned citizens, and we're walking down our streets and there's just cars flying by. These streets are not made for this volume, the amount of people, coming to our neighborhood and, pulling into my driveway and turning around and this kind of thing. So, I thank you to the chief and to the mayor who have taken action, primarily on the weekends, to post temporary signs of, no littering, and also posting police at the gate and closing that. However, the neighbors and I still feel strongly that we want a permanent solution, whether it be, resident no parking signs, or such. You guys are the, elected officials, and we look to you guys for guidance and help to continue to fight this problem. And that's all for my comment. Thank you.
Can you repeat
Thank you
your
so
name?
much for
Your name?
This is Josephina Riley.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple more callers waiting for public comment.
Okay.
Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. We are currently discussing items not on the agenda. You will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comment. You may proceed.
Hi, this is Mary Ann Shinnick, a resident of Sierra Madre, 53 years, currently living on Arno. You have my letter on record, but I felt it's also important to verbally say what I wrote in the letter. So first, I actually want to thank Sierra Madre Police Department for patrolling and monitoring the gate on Chantry for the last week or so, as we have new throngs of people, as the previous caller said, that have been wanting to access the mountain road. I also want to thank the mayor for actually walking our street and the surrounding streets and actually biking as well and talking to residents about this problem. And then finally, thank the city, of course, for the new sign. As a resident of Arno on the west side of Santa Anita, we've always had people parking on the street on the weekends to go hike the trail, whether the gate's open or closed. The problem with the people coming up to hike when the gate is closed is they think that the trail is just beyond the gate. And then now with COVID-19 restrictions lifted, the influence of social media, this has become totally unbearable, almost on a daily basis, but definitely on the weekend, as we have hordes of cars driving and parking on our street and then the surrounding streets, Liliano, Santa Anita, and so on. When the gate is closed or the lot is full, the sign down below the open gate says lot full, which every day it's one or the other, typically right now. People have totally ignored the sign on Santa Anita that's currently there that says that's closed to pedestrians, and they park with the full intent of walking up the road anyway, again thinking that the hiking trail starts right past the yellow gate. This has brought, like I said, hundreds of people a day on the weekends to our neighborhood, mostly in groups, no social distancing, no masks. And we're finding when we do talk to people, they're coming from multiple different cities, Orange County, and even as far as out of state. And then the people that are actually parking on the street below the gate, intending to walk up the road, another big issue is that they don't realize that not only is it not just past the yellow gate, it's almost 4 miles to the start of the trail. And while there was a sign not too long ago that said the trailhead was almost 4 miles up, people think the trailhead is the top of the trail. That still wasn't clear enough for most of the people that we're seeing coming up here. We're seeing kids in little flip-flops, moms with strollers, going up and walking up, holding a Starbucks cup and maybe a water bottle, if that. We believe it's a risk to public safety on the mountain road, having people walk on it when there's also cars driving on it. And then the other risk that we want to try to abate is to have more signage that's clear, maybe even at a 6th grade level, that actually describes the actual distance from the start of the gate to the trail, or even from Grand View to the start of the trail, not the trailhead. And then having a prominent sign elsewhere, like at the gate, maybe even on Arno. And then finally, a lot of the residents on my street Would like to have resident-only parking as a discussion item on the agenda so that we could have the option of not having enormous amount of people on our street on a daily basis. Leaving trash, congregating, picnicking, and just hanging out, not to mention taking pictures of our houses. Thank you for your time.
All right,
Okay,
thank you for your comment. Mayor and City Council, for your reference, we have 4 people in line for public comment.
Okay.
Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. We are currently discussing items not on the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to make your comment. You may proceed.
My name is Jacob Fakori. I live on 1227 Arno Drive, Sierra Madre. Thank you to the mayor and the city council for taking our call on issues that are not on your agenda. Before I proceed any further, just extend some gratitude to Chief Armelin and his deputies in the Sierra Madre Police Department. They've been very responsive to the situation that we've been experiencing on Chantry Flats, the gate to Chantry Flats area, with overflow parking and excess people walking our streets with disregard for everything else. My family and I have lived here for 36 plus years, and we've never experienced a situation like this. Now, due to COVID, but mostly due to parking changes up in Country Flats area, our neighborhood has been changed into a public parking lot for overflow parking from Chantry Flats. And with that, the attendant side effects. We witnessed consistent and blatant disregard for private property, using our yards as restrooms, blocking our driveways, even fire hydrants, which creates a bit of a dangerous situation. It's been brought to my attention that the county has changed its parking rules up at Chantry Flats because they were concerned of the dangers of getting fire trucks and ambulances and response teams up there. But what has happened is that has now been transferred down to our narrow streets that we live in. It would be near impossible for a fire truck or ambulance to get into our streets with double parking on both sides of a small cul-de-sac. That's really dangerous, with the side effects that's gonna put the city liable for our safety. Really, it is not, we live in a residential area. Our streets are for residential parking. We're not a public parking lot. You know, this is unacceptable. I'm not sure if you're aware, but you know, Eden Canyon, which also has trails, recently they've instituted new rules and regulations. You can't enter the park unless you have a reservation. You have to go with an ID and have a reservation before they let you in there. So, I mean, I think the county has shown total disregard for our area. We request the city at least to try and find out what they're doing to solve this situation. You really can't transfer the burden on our Sierra Madre Police Department alone. They have a whole city to look after. And we would appreciate some help in addressing this situation, really. It's really very depressing to see what's happening to our neighborhood. We moved here to Sierra Madre for the kind of living which we wanted to. We don't want to see this deteriorate, and it's in the early phases, and I don't think we're going to stand by and let that happen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your comment. Good evening, caller. Thank you for calling. We are currently discussing items not on the agenda. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comment. You may proceed.
Hello, this is Lon and Cheryl Chipola.
Hello.
First, the previous caller, I just like to support everything he said. That's not the purpose of our call, but we also live on the pathway to Chantry Flats and have had horrible times finding parking. There's trash left all over our yards and such. So full support for what he said. Secondly, I want to make sure and draw your attention to an email and a letter that we sent regarding DRP 1906, which is a design permit that was given to a property 2 houses below us at 1910 Santa Anita Avenue. The property was approved to build a house. Excuse me, my grandson is making some noise, but they were approved to build a house that will completely block our view of the valley below. We have been 28-year residents of Sierra Madre. When we bought our house, we specifically bought it because of the view. I am on disability. My husband is retired, and we have tried since early May to communicate through Vincent Gonzalez and other people in the Planning and Community Preservation Department, and we have not gotten any cooperation or response other than we needed to appeal within 10 days of the decision made April 2nd. We don't agree that this is an appeal decision, and we are hoping we don't have to fight it, but we will, because it will significantly devalue our property, and it will also significantly interfere with the use and enjoyment of our home. So I want to make sure you look at the letter in full. It is clear we were able to finally reach the designer. It is clear that he did not in any way consider our views and property use because he wasn't aware of the situation. He also mentioned that he would have a surveyor come out and take a look at what the impact would be to us. But then he stopped communicating with us on June 5th. The owner, we can't identify them. The designer said he would let the owner know, but we have not heard from the owner. And we, after watching the city meetings that happened February 22nd and then April 2nd, where this was approved, we were, it was clear that the situation was completely and fraudulently misrepresented. It was told to the Planning Commission that this development, that this project would not interfere with the surrounding views, property and use and enjoyment. And then between February and April, the designs were changed to raise the property height up, but it wasn't listed in any of the changes and revisions that the property had been raised up. And it was again misrepresented that it would not interfere with surrounding and neighboring views. So we believe this is a case of fraudulent misrepresentation, and there is a process in the municipal code for handling fraud to revoke the permit. All we want is for them, that we've even talked with the designer, there is a possibility for them to lower the grade and lower the roof and satisfy everyone. But
Sorry to
we need
interrupt, caller.
cooperation to happen.
You have reached 3 minutes. If you'd have a final comment, you may provide it.
Yes. No, the only final comment is to please read the letter, please consider our situation, and please let's come up with a cooperative solution for everyone. We really don't want to have to go to a legal battle to protect our rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Good evening, caller. Thank you for calling. We are currently taking public comment on items not on the agenda. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comment. You may proceed. We are currently seeing a lot of feedback from your end. Please mute your live feed so that you avoid the feedback. You may proceed with your
Is this
comment.
better? Is this better?
Much better. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Margaret Fullenwider, and I live at 2082 Kaya Lane in Sierra Madre. I also have concerns regarding the Chantry Flats Road. As we have been told, there are 6 jurisdictions on the road up to and including Chantry Flat. The primary reason for Chantry Flats closure is the designated closure by the U.S. Forest Service. It has been the Sierra Madre Police, however, who have been manning the gate at North Santa Anita and turning hikers away. As such, is Sierra Madre being billed for this service? Shouldn't it be shared by all 6 jurisdictions? So that is a question I pose to you. My other concerns are in support of my other fellow neighbors for the safety of our neighborhoods of North Santa Anita, Liliano Drive, Arno Drive, and Kaya Lane. Since the restricted access and closure of Chantry Flats, we are encountering a dangerous problem on our streets of speeding traffic, overcrowded parking, trash, including biohazardous materials, as well as limited access for emergency vehicles. This occurs on weekends as well as on weekdays. This problem exists in spite of the police presence, and thank you, at the Chantry Gate on North Santa Anita. This has never before been a problem, and yes, we are sensitive to COVID-19. We have signed a petition with over 100 signatures requesting a solution to this problem. The city needs to provide for the safety of its residents and a solution to this dangerous problem. A neighborhood group will gladly meet with city officials, police, fire, etc. at your earliest convenience. And we appreciate the very aggressive actions that we have had at this point from the police and city officials. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, at this point, there are no more callers in the queue for public comments for items not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, just, so a lot of stuff, some of this stuff is very sensitive, and I don't know that it's appropriate that we comment on these things, especially the first one, Alverno, and the second to the last about the DRP 1906. So we'll take those completely offline and determine an appropriate response. I really don't want to discuss it here at this time. And as far as the problems on Chantry, I mean, we hear that loud and clear. Again, there's two issues here. One is a short term and one is a potential long term. Once things get to normal, are we going to be seeing the same kind of thing? So we certainly do want to have that discussion with the local neighbors. We're going to agendize it for the next city council meeting to look at what some of our options are. But in the meantime, I believe Chief Armelin has a plan to deal with the upcoming weekend. And, maybe we can just get that out and make sure we know how we're going to do that for the upcoming weekend. And yeah, it's a very, very uncomfortable situation that we're all faced with, and very complex in dealing with the different agencies that have jurisdiction over this. So we're going to keep working at it till we get it right. Mr. City Manager, do you have any comments to make?
Thanks, Mayor. So far over the past 2 weekends, we've dedicated about 300 police hours to enforcement of the gate closure. That's in addition to the extra patrols we've put up there. We've written about 90 total citations, 80 of them parking, 7 moving citations. We put up a road close sign, an electronic reader board. We put up 3 detour signs. We put up a number of yard signs. And the people still drive up, and when they get to the gate, they're met with an officer, and then the officer turns them around. So we're aware of the issue. We're responding with maximum force that we have. We've contacted the Forest Service. They are continuing to leave the gate closed on weekends. They may start opening it up more regularly during the week until they hit capacity. When we ask them for assistance in dealing with the issues it causes in the neighborhood when they close the gate, they just said that they're underfunded and they don't have the ability to assist us. They asked us to call the county, which we have done. We'll see if we can provide get some assistance there. So we agree other agencies should be bearing the cost of this. They've declined to do so at this point. So Sierra Madre has stepped in to protect the neighborhood and deal with the issue. For this upcoming weekend, we're also going to have an officer stationed at the gate, all of the road close signs, all the detour signs. We're also going to pay 2 officers to do parking enforcement specifically in that area, as well as over by Mount Wilson Trail. And we are again dedicating additional patrols to the area. We what we are hearing is that people are Googling not the website, but Googling seeing if Chantry Flats is open. And then they're driving down from out of state, from Fresno. When they see that the gate is closed, they become very upset, which is why they turn their cars around and leave rather quickly out of town. So we are dealing with the issue, putting a lot of resources towards it. We're open to all sorts of ideas. I know you and I, Mayor, have a meeting with one of the neighborhood representatives along with the chief this Tuesday. So we're open to hear what solutions may work. We're putting maximum effort behind it. And what we are hearing is that people have been inside for 12 or 14 weeks. They want to be outside and enjoy recreation. And because we're only in phase 2, they have very limited opportunities, which is why Sierra Madre, like every area that has outdoor recreation opportunities, is seeing peak numbers. We are going to put the sign up on the gate saying it's a 4-mile treacherous hike. We saw the same thing. I saw on the first night people try to walk up with inner tubes in their swimsuits. So I'm not sure what information they're getting. We're aware it's a serious problem. We're ready to meet with the neighborhood. We'll continue the dialogue, and we're putting maximum resources behind it. But on Sunday by 10 a.m., our officers had turned 300 people away. So there are people that are coming and will continue to come to the neighborhood regardless of what we put in place.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move ahead with the agenda here. Next up on the agenda is the consent calendar. So, Madam City Clerk, if you can present us the.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have 4 items. Item A, adoption of resolution 20-38 of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre approving certain demands. Item B, First Transit Transportation Services, first contract extension for 1 year. Item C, consideration of adoption of resolution 20-34, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre declaring compliance with state mandated fire and life safety inspections for schools and multi-residential occupancies for calendar year 2019. And the last one, recommendation to approve the expenditure of development impact fees for the Sierra Vista parking lot improvement project. Construction contract in an amount of $146,000 to All American Asphalt. And that concludes the consent items.
Okay, are there any questions for staff on the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, any discussion?
I just had a quick question on the First Transit. Noticed is that I assume its ridership is way down. How bad is it?
Yeah, this is James Carlson. You're correct. The ridership is a bit down. What we are noticing, however, is that the dial-a-ride, and that's a site-specific service that they provide, has not really slipped off too much.
Oh.
In my mind, I think it might still be a bit of a lifeline for some of our seniors to get to the pharmacy or to get to the grocery stores and such. So we are recommending another year extension on this. I also have members of First Transit available if you have any specific questions for them.
No. Thank you.
I have just a follow-up question on the First Transit. I know right now it seems like the models folks for the dial ride call in. Is there any sort of technological advancement there with an app or anything online? Because I think James is right. I think it is mostly used by our seniors, but I could see a lot of folks potentially wanting to use it and maybe not knowing exactly how to call in and get a dial ride. So how are we, I guess, getting folks the information on how to use it?
Sure. Right now, we're using our traditional publicity methods, but we have for the last year been having robust discussions with the subcommittee, and that's comprised of a member of the Community Services Commission, the Community Seniors Commission, Public Works staff, as well as Community Services staff. And we were really bouncing around a lot of ideas, including increasing the technology capabilities. When this COVID came, though, we had to set that aside, and we do intend to get back to searching new ideas. First Transit has been involved in some of these discussions, so we do intend to pursue new ideas. At this time, we just need to probably extend the contract.
And Zach and Rashidi, I don't know if, are you guys able to have a system where someone could use an app to order the dial ride or anything like that that we could use?
Yes, this is Rashidi Barnes. Yes, we do have applications that seniors and or general public can use to dial up a ride. It's a more sophisticated than just that, but we do have those type of applications. We haven't discussed it for this specific extension, but there are options out there that we have used in other areas of the country.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, the only thing I'd like to say is before we, move forward, well, I'm good with this, but a year from now, when this contract is up, I'd like to look at what other alternatives we have. I mean, just given that Uber and Lyft, if we just look at these short rides, say the average cost of a ride was $5 for $100,000, we could provide 20,000 rides, $5 a ride. So I just want to make sure that we're providing the best possible service to those that need the service in the most cost-effective way. I mean, if we could subsidize 20,000 rides, short rides, just by paying for the whole thing. So I would just like some analysis on it, what our options are, and is there a better way to serve those that use these? And again, with regard to statistics, not only how many times a ride is provided, but I want to know the number of different individuals. Like, is there 20 people using this over and over? Are there 100 people? How many people actually use it? And how often do they use it? So provide that, both ways. So we've got a whole year to work on that, but just would like to see that analysis. Okay, any other comments? Any comments on anything else on the consent calendar? Okay, Madam City Clerk, can we call for the vote?
Did we get a second and a?
Oh, that's
Sorry.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
And I'll second that. And Mayor, we don't have public comment separately on this.
No, ask for public comment at the same time.
Got it. Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay. Mayor John Caposcia?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss?
Aye.
Councilmember John Harabedian?
Yes.
The motion to approve consent items 1A through 1D as presented was passed by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, so now we're going to move into a couple of public hearings. One is consideration of adoption of vehicle miles traveled baselines and thresholds of significance.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As indicated in the staff report, changes in state law requires the city to adopt new CEQA thresholds of significance, which will modify how the city evaluates projects for transportation impacts. Specifically, the city is required to use vehicle miles traveled instead of level of service as the metric to evaluate transportation impacts in CEQA documents, such as initial studies and environmental impact reports. City staff, in coordination with our consultant, prepared new CEQA transportation impact baseline thresholds that will be considered by the City Council this evening. The staff recommendation is requesting that the City Council adopt vehicle miles traveled baselines and thresholds of significance for purposes of analyzing transportation impacts under the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to City Council Resolution 2030. At this time, I would like to introduce Jolene Hayes, a senior associate with Fair and Peers Transportation Consultants, who will be giving a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening and is also available to answer any of your questions. So with that, if we could cue the PowerPoint presentation.
Am I supposed to be the one queuing it? Or I can't remember if it's me or you guys on this one. Yes, I'm disabled.
I'll be doing that for you, Jolene.
All right, that's what I thought.
Okay, we're ready to go. It's up on the screen.
Okay, I can't see it yet. There it is. Okay, great. So, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Today we are here to talk about SB 743. This has been something in the works since 2013. It's a change in the way that we analyze traffic from level of service to looking at vehicle miles of travel, and it's all focused on greenhouse gas emissions. So tonight we're going to be talking about the methodology for calculating VMT, the thresholds of significance that the city is considering, screening criteria that's allowed under the Office of Planning and Research rules, and then the mitigation options, which are a little bit different under VMT than they are level of service. Next slide. So this all began really back in about 2006 with the AB 32 rule. And since then, the state has been really focusing on how to align our traffic impact analysis with our sustainable community strategies. So a lot of your general plans have already gone through the process of trying to be compliant with the state rules when it comes to a lot of the air quality emission impacts, but we hadn't aligned the traffic impact studies with it yet. Next slide. So as I mentioned, 2013 was when this rule was legislated. So the governor signed the bill back in September of 2013, but it took several years for the Office of Planning and Research to come up with the guidelines for how to implement it, because it's a very challenging and very different way of looking at traffic impact analysis. So the rules were adopted in December of 2018, and then the state gave all of the cities and agencies that have this authority until July 1st of this year to approve the thresholds of significance that would be looked at through your CEQA process. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this is really meant to align how we look at traffic with how we look at our land use planning. Most of this is just looking at infill development, promoting more walkability, shorter trips, making it easier for you to get to the places that are serving you in your neighborhoods, and the overall goal of reducing greenhouse gases and slowing down climate change. Next slide. Oh, this one's a little wonky, but you can see this is level of service. So level of service is how we've always looked at traffic, and most cities will continue to look at that because of their general plan consistency issues with not wanting too much congestion. You still want people to be able to move around efficiently in your city. But what it does is it takes that level of service congestion analysis out of your CEQA process and puts it more in your development approval process. So the methods are different with how we calculate it. And next slide, explain how. So there are some different screening criteria that are associated with VMT. It changed the daily trips allowed. Under the old rules, it was 50 p.m. peak hour trips. Now it's looking at 110 daily trips. So projects that generate those can be screened out. A big change is local serving retail. So it recognizes that having a grocery store near your neighborhood versus on the other side of town really reduces those vehicle miles of travel. So up to 50,000 square feet is what OPR guidelines suggest. Local serving schools, daycares, other types of community centers, affordable housing, and then there's also this low VMT generating. So areas of your city where you have more dense development is where more development is encouraged to occur so that people can walk and bike to those places. And then there's also the transit priority area, which if you have a major transit system, and City of Sierra Madre does not have one currently, but I know it's something that's being considered. Next slide. So the mitigation strategies are also different. Instead of widening a roadway or adding a traffic signal, which were the traditional ways of dealing with traffic impacts, now you're looking at ways to encourage people to use other modes of transportation, or be more efficient with the single occupant vehicle by carpooling with somebody. Telecommuting, there's a lot of different strategies around parking. So uncoupling parking from development and charging different fees for it, or even charging fees for public parking. So there's a number of different strategies, and they all have different percentages of reduction. Next slide. So the city, in order to comply with SB 743, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's really adopting the threshold. So that's the main requirement. And then the publishing of your traffic impact study guidelines, which will include this new way of calculating the impacts using vehicle miles of travel. And then for projects that don't screen out, that you do have to go through the steps, it's very similar to what we did for level of service analysis. Instead of calculating congestion at an intersection, though, we're calculating a project's total vehicle miles of travel per person and comparing that back to the thresholds of significance. And then when we look at mitigation measures, we're looking at those other strategies instead of your traditional strategies for mitigating the impacts. Next slide. So with that, that pretty much sums it up. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, who has questions?
I do. Thanks for the presentation. It's interesting stuff. And I'm not sure I totally understand it, but one thing I guess I don't get is where's the baseline coming from? So when you're trying to figure out the impact, where are we taking the baseline for VMT?
And that's the interesting thing with it, because we have to use the SCAG model. There is not a San Gabriel Valley COG model, which that's the group of cities that we worked on with this throughout this process. The SCAG model covers the whole 6 counties. So it's a little bit of a bear to run, but it does have fairly decent localized traffic analysis zone information, which pulls some information from the census data, but the rest of it is calibrated with traffic counts and information that we receive from the planning department that feeds into the overall SCAG model. So that's where it all comes from. The baseline changes annually because your population and employment numbers change annually. So depending on what your notice of preparation date is for, say, a CEQA document, that start date, so say it's 2021, you would use the threshold of significance that's identified in the model for 2021.
Okay. And the reason why we exempt, I think you said retail establishments of 50,000 square feet or below, is because that actually reduces vehicle miles traveled. Because, for example, if there's a grocery store, folks in town will not then drive further to go get groceries. Did I hear you correctly?
You did hear me correctly.
Okay.
And that's one of the questions that I've gotten asked the most when it comes to that are fast food restaurants. People are concerned about the other potential impacts of those, but there's also still a requirement that you look at safety. So queuing analysis and things like that would still be required under CEQA, but for the traffic impact specifically, that's where it's different.
So is VMT vehicle miles traveled for those living in Sierra Madre, or is it folks that, I guess I'm not clear on how it's calculated, because, you could make the argument that these retail establishments up to 50,000 square feet are bringing in folks from out of town, right? Where that could potentially increase VMT. So what exactly is VMT then?
It looks at the total VMT per service truck. Oh my.
It's okay.
I have a 2-year-old who figured out how to unlock the door.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead. We don't mind it. I have one as well.
Okay. And
Yeah, so I guess on that point, you know, if you're looking at everything as a whole, it's, while it may be reducing VMT for folks that live near the retail establishment, it could be increasing it for folks that live away from it because they're going to want to potentially travel towards the establishment once it's built. So
the
I
model
guess
will
these
pick up all of the demand though for the site. So if it is a retail site, it does pick up those additional tours that are associated with retail. So one of the other things that we're in the process of doing is building a tool for the whole San Gabriel Valley. It'll allow developers and planners and whoever needs to understand what the potential VMT on a site is to go in and put in the project details. And it'll really focus on 4 potential project types, retail being one of them under the commercial allocation. So all of those numbers are included in the SCAG model as averages within certain geographic areas. So that information will all be available for people to at least estimate it. If a project exceeds that threshold, the tool isn't very good at looking at the project's overall efficiency rates.
That's helpful. And let me ask a question of Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you for that. Why did it wasn't clear to me why the Planning Commission went to a 20,000 square foot exemption, at least in the findings and in what they actually passed. So what was their thinking on the 20,000 square foot exemption versus the 50,000?
The Planning Commission's thought was that if we had a project, what is the likelihood of having a retail or mixed-use project with a threshold of 50,000 square feet? And they determined that that was very unlikely, that we would more likely see something in the range of 25,000 square feet. And they went with the premise to lower that threshold.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, who else has questions? Mayor Pro Tem, I see. Mayor,
Councilmember Harabedian asked it. I was just trying to understand also the Planning Commission thought behind it.
yeah. Okay, well, let me ask a few questions. Let's talk about, say, a residential example. So I know that this is coming up, the proposal on the monastery, which is 40-something units. So does the model assume where people live today and the model and the vehicle miles that they travel versus now 40 homes are going to be built and they're going to be moving from somewhere else to here and driving to where they normally drive to? I just cannot visualize how a model can come up with anything meaningful on vehicle miles traveled on something like that.
Well, the model is certainly not perfect, but it does give a pretty good estimate of how far people have to travel to get places. So there's a couple of different ways that you can look at projects. You can look at them more in a regional context. So if you did the modeling, say a project did go over the threshold of significance, you could look at a wider area and see what the overall increase in VMT would be from that project moving forward.
Well, what I'm trying to say though is how much can we even trust something so generic like this? Because unless you know of the 40 people that are buying the house, where they live today, and where they go to work, and now they're moving here to Sierra Madre, are they driving more or less? How is that even knowable when you're doing an analysis?
I think the only sense of comfort I have is even when we do, if you look at intersection impact analysis, it's far from perfect as well. We collect data on 2 days out of the whole year, and that's supposed to represent the traffic at that location on a daily basis. So it's not a perfect tool.
But you're collecting data, and you're making a judgment on data. This is not, this is generic over the entire SCAG with some regional differences.
It's much more sophisticated than that. There is a bunch of traffic information that is pulled and collected. For instance, we use big data. So there is streetlight data, for instance, that's GPS data that is used to help calibrate and update the model to make sure that the information being driven out of those traffic analysis zones has some reality to it. So it's not perfect by any means, but it is getting more and more sophisticated.
Okay, so what about mitigation on these various things you showed on the slide for mitigation? So a developer, say we run the model and we find that we are just above that threshold, which is 15% below the average or something like that. So you're a few points above it. Now you've got to get below the threshold. So how do you sort through the possible mitigation things that are available to you to calculate whether any of those are going to get you over the threshold? And then it's a cost benefit, like, okay, I've got these 5 that will get me over the threshold. What does it cost to implement them? I mean, how do you go about that?
And the tool will help with a lot of that because there are some mechanisms that are being built into the tool. So what are some appropriate measures in your city? So if, for instance, you had a bike plan that you were trying to implement, or there were gaps in your sidewalk network that you wanted to improve, you wanted to put a new transit bench somewhere out there, there are certain things that there's reductions that are associated with each one of those strategies. So when a developer does go in, selects a site, sees that there's a certain amount over the threshold that they need to try to get it down, they can go in and play with those different options and make some decisions. And ultimately what SCAG is doing right now is they initiated a study just recently for the whole SCAG region, which will be a mitigation bank, where developers will have an option to pay out of, for larger projects that are very much over they would have a choice of either trying to pay into a mitigation bank to mitigate, or the city could approve a statement of overriding considerations.
I see. Okay, how much does it cost to do a VMT analysis? Is that depending on the project itself?
Yeah, for most of the projects, if they're in the area that you want them to be in, they screen out from having to do any VMT or traffic impact analysis for that matter. We did look at the residential project that was up at the monastery, and it's not over by much. So my guess is with that particular project, you could use the screening tool, identify some mitigation, and potentially do some mitigation that would be able to address the VMT impact.
But how much does it cost to run the study?
To do the screening tool like that, it's just that would be typical.
You're over the threshold. You want to build 51,000 square feet. Now I have to do a study. How much does it cost to do the study?
The study would be the same as what they would typically be doing for a traffic impact study. I mean, as long as you're only using the screening tool, if you're only barely over the threshold, so if you're only 1,000 square feet over that 50,000, most of the time you'll be able to just use the screening tool. If you have a project that's much larger that would typically require an EIR anyways, the additional cost for this part of the traffic analysis is about $5,000 more on the traffic analysis to get the modeling data.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, this is a public hearing, so I will now open the public hearing for comments from the public. So there's the number to call in if you're listening. And I'll wait a few minutes to give you time to call in.
Mr. Mayor, you don't currently have any callers in the queue for public comment.
Okay. I'm not surprised. It's kind of an obscure topic. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, Ms. Hayes, thank you very much for helping out and explaining all that. So with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for discussion. Oh, who would like to go?
I'll just go really quickly. And thank you, Ms. Hayes, for the helpful comments and the information, and Director Gonzalez. I'm fine with this as it is, as staff has recommended.
Yeah, so am I.
I am too. I'm just surprised it's a July 1 implementation date, and it's just still so fresh to me, and I'm sure as we move forward, we're all going to have to experiment with it. And I also support us being consistent with the Office of Planning and Research and SCAG recommendations. So as the city staff had recommended for the resolution.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm the same way. I did discuss this with the chairperson of the Planning Commission and one other commissioner as well, and I ran into him on the street. And yeah, I really don't agree with reducing the threshold because I just don't see how that is going to affect Sierra Madre, and I don't want to put that on anybody who might want to be developing something in Sierra Madre to put kind of an artificial hurdle. So I'm good with just doing the minimum of what the state requires and leave it at that, and just, hope for the best when a project like this comes up. So, okay, so with that, Madam City Clerk, can we call for the vote?
Oh, I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor John Caposcia,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi,
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Aye.
Councilmember John Herbedian.
Aye.
The motion to adopt Resolution 2030 was approved as unanimous vote, by unanimous vote, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, number 2, some budget resolutions, and this is some exciting stuff. Mr. City Manager, do you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for acknowledging the excitement that is budget. We have a brief presentation that I will give the first half of, followed by our finance director. So I'm going to wait for James to allow me to share my screen, and then we will pull the presentation up.
Mr. City Manager, you should be able to share your screen now.
All right. So this is a presentation on the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget. Before we start with what the numbers look like, I think we need to address the options we're giving council with the pandemic response. We've seen already many local municipalities, some of our neighbors, having to take drastic measures, laying off staff, furloughing employees, pay cuts, deferring capital projects. I'm happy to say that with the plan we've put together, we're not recommending that for this year. When the Safer at Home order started, the first thing we did as a staff is reviewed areas where we could pull funds back from the general fund and use these funds to mount our pandemic response. Everything from the food assistance that we're providing to seniors to the closing of Chantry Gate with officers. All of this is reimbursable through FEMA, but you have to have the money before it can get reimbursed. So we went through by department and found about $400,000 total and repurposed some of the money. And that's how we've been able to have a response this year. So when we end the year, the amended budget will be balanced with a small surplus. The additional steps that we've taken, and I won't go through all of these, was essentially to stop all activity that we could that wouldn't harm services. And then as we got further into the pandemic, we analyzed which of these that we could carry forward. So this budget does recommend suspending the compensation program for 2021, which means no step increases for employees and no COLA. We also offered early retirement to part-time and full-time employees. They have until it's either June 30 or July 6 to respond. So we haven't built any numbers into the budget this year or for next year yet, but it is an option we offered that could save some funds to the city. When we look at the revenue projections for 2021, you see that we're expecting our revenues to slide quite dramatically. The sales tax, negative 38%. When you look at the budget, it looks like we've actually increased our sales tax a little bit in the projection. And that is because, as council knows, Measure S passed this last year. And instead of collecting 1 cent for every dollar in sales tax, Sierra Madre is now collecting 1.75 cents for every dollar spent on sales tax, which means even at a 40%, near 40% reduction, our sales tax for next year will be slightly higher than this year. Other than that, we're budgeting for a delinquency rate in property tax. We're budgeting for losses across the board in overnight parking, rent, business licenses, and events. The proposed fiscal year 2021 budget is balanced with a surplus. It's $1.2 million. It's about 8% of our expenditures. We're going to increase our contingency. Typically, we budget $100,000 in contingency. That's for unforeseen, unbudgeted items, so we're able to address them throughout the year. Because we have so much variability and unknown moving forward with COVID-19, we've decided to increase that. We also are funding all equipment and training for public safety, which includes the purchase of a new ambulance. Our current reserve ambulance is out of service right now, and it's about 11 years old. We'd like to replace that and make our current primary ambulance our reserve. And then as we talked about, we're going to give council options at mid-year to change some of the recommendations we've made. So if we get into mid-year and the year is going the way we're projecting, we're going to ask council to make a CalPERS an additional pension prepayment in January, and we're also going to look at lifting the pay freeze that we're recommending. So when we talk about how we got to the surplus and what we're doing, we really looked at making budget changes in 3 categories: one-time, recurring, or permanent. And the reason these distinctions are important is if we do something one time, it's not going to change the level of service, but we are going to have to add the funds back into a future year budget. So you'll see on the next slide, we've identified about $400,000 in one-time reductions that will have to be added back into the general fund next year. We have recurring reductions, which may provide service interruptions, and they also do have to be added back into the budget in future years. We've identified about $350,000 there. So over the next 3 years, we will have to add $750,000 back into the budget. And then there's permanent reductions, which are a change in service, about $85,000 this year, but we don't have to add them back into the general fund because we're assuming we won't do these activities moving forward. So when we look at the areas, we tried to break it up in color coding and show you where the savings are coming from. So as an example of a one-time expenditure where there's savings, we have a fund balance in our COPS fund of about $200,000. These funds can be used to go towards any supplemental law enforcement service that's not frontline. So we are recommending taking that reserve down this reserve down this year to zero. We're also looking, if you go into the recurring category in green, of paying our CalPERS obligation from an internal service fund. It's an appropriate place to pay it from, but that means that it won't come from the general fund this year. And then the permanent changes that we're looking at, you'll notice we don't have a calculation for early retirement. but we are recommending eliminating the community service grants, as well as the program assistance to the YMCA, and also reducing our LAPD patrol. We have that in the police department budget as part-time expenditure. Our chief has a vision of moving away from supplemental patrol from LAPD and providing the service solely from Sierra Madre Police Department employees. I support the vision. I think it's a good vision. And these funds, even though they're not budgeted, were also funds that were not expended this year, and there's no not a person associated with the reduction. In year two, you look, if we're getting into a housing situation now, we can't do anything else. It's one time, so we have to increase our recurring, and now we have to increase our permanent. So you see that we've added layoffs in year two if that's necessary. And then in year three, again, we move further away from the recurring and more towards the permanent, which is service level reductions. But the reason the first year and managing the budget this year is so important is, you see when we talk about the general fund return that we talked about 2 slides ago, is the first year we get the full savings, 850,000. As we move forward to year 2 and 3, we have to do more recurring or more permanent changes to our service level. But even though we're doing greater, our return is less. So you'll see that the general fund return is substantial in years 2 and 3. And in the third year, with everything we've done, we'll actually be not saving any money with the changes. Over 3 years, it's $1 million in savings. But what we're hoping is, by doing the one time this year, is that council will be able to use fund balance or in-year savings to avoid any of the further reductions in year 2 or year 3. So before I turn it over to the finance director, this is the general fund summary. We currently have a beginning fund balance at 6.6 million, which is 63% of our general fund, which is very good. It puts us in a position much stronger than many California cities, certainly stronger than many of our peers. And we're projecting our ending fund balance to be 72%, or 7.8 million. So we are going into both the pandemic, but potentially if there is a housing crisis similar to 2008, we're going into that with a position of strength. And this budget is designed to give council the ability to pull additional levers in year 2 and 3, but still not have to make the drastic cuts that we've seen other governments make. So we've talked about some of this, but we're in our 3rd consecutive year of an all fund surplus, almost 3 million. 1.2 million of that is in the general fund. And if you look at our budgeted FTE, and this will be my last slide, we are now down below levels that were in 2014, 2015. When we talked about the 2019-2020 budget, the budget we're in, and we presented this slide, we had a little uptick at the end saying that we felt that we needed to add staff, particularly in police, administrative services, and some other support areas. And because of the pandemic, we not only put those plans on hold, but we reduced further. We do not think that the 82.93, the 83 FTEs is a sustainable position for our services to be in. But in an attempt to keep everyone employed and maintain a healthy fiscal budget, we decided to take the cuts this year again, and then bring decisions back to council at mid-year, January of 21, and decide if we can add some of these services back. So I'm going to turn it over to our finance director to walk us through the specific funds.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. So now we'll go through each fund, general fund, water, sewer, in more detail. Here we can see the revenues in the general fund for 18-19 actuals, 19-20 adopted, and then the proposed for 2021. We can see the reduction in revenues that Gabe was talking about. In expenditures, we see by department, and in 18-19, the deficit of 1.8 million was due to the 5 million CalPERS prepayment, which is also the difference in the administrative services component. The general fund sources, we included 2% delinquency and property tax projections and also reduced sales tax projections by 38%. The expenditures here we see by department in a graph. And to summarize the general fund by department, police, we added a new full-time position and decreased part-time hours. For fire, there was an increase in the budget, and it was due to the 20% salary increase and also a budgeted chief position. And we also hired a part-time training captain. For public works, there's reduced expenditures due to the stormwater Measure W funding that we're expecting. We also budgeted $10,000 for the Lizzie Trail housing, and also we're continuing the aggressive street program. Community services and library, we decreased primarily due to 1 FTE reduction in the library, and community services, we decreased part-time hours. Now to the water fund. Here's an overview of the water fund. We see the change in net position before capital investments is 1.8 for 2021. That's our projection. And then we budget to invest 1.5. Here's a graph to show the capital investment over years. The water fund, some changes in there were personal expense increased by 6%, and it's mainly also for the part-time budget. Infrastructure, I mentioned, is budgeted at 1.5 million, but we're also negotiating an interest-free loan from the water district. For the sewer fund, here we see the net position change is $8,000 before capital investment. And over the years, we can see the expenditures in this fund. Investment in capital assets, we're projecting to invest in the sewer system and also a portion of the sewer truck for 2021. And the debt, the last payment was made in 1920, so in 2021 we have no debt payments. The recommendation is to adopt the following resolutions. And then thank you. If you have any questions. Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, thank you. What questions does the council have?
I just have one question that I know it came up twice in the slides, so thank you, Interim Director Hillary, and also City Manager England for the presentation. I smile at a lot of those graphs because it's great to see things like the infrastructure and the change over the years. Love seeing 1.8 million surplus and a balanced budget. Those are all fun things. I want to better understand the property tax and the projection for a 2% assumption for delinquency. Is that due to COVID? Is that a standard we've used before? Just understanding that property taxes are our biggest revenue for the city. I just want to know that and understand that number better.
Mayor Pro Tem, the property taxes are what we're going to refer to as a lagging indicator. So you're seeing our sales tax, which is a leading indicator. That goes first because that's immediate. If this goes into a housing crisis due to the unemployment, we'll see that in the next fiscal year as homes are reassessed or as foreclosures take place. The 2% delinquency rate is something that, as far as we can tell, Sierra Madre has not budgeted for. What that's essentially saying is that 2% of the population in this year will be unable to pay their property taxes, either in part or in full. And if we don't receive those payments, obviously it doesn't become a revenue source for us. There is a delinquency rate typically associated with most cities, and no one pays 100% of all their property taxes every year. But the reason it hasn't been budgeted for is your increase in property taxes usually wipes out the delinquency rate. A lot of local governments are budgeting for an increasing delinquency rate this year. And we're doing it again to provide a conservative approach. So if revenues come in higher and we don't experience that delinquency rate, then it's not revenue that we were counting on.
And then just to follow up on that, just why 2%? Is there something that drives the 2%?
It was not a magic number, Mayor Pro Tem. We looked at what the county was doing as a whole, and then we tried to find some comparators and what they were budgeting. But this is not an exact science. The same way as we've been unable to determine what our share tax is going to be. So we just put in conservative numbers. So if we're going to miss the mark, we want to miss it on the less harmful side.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I have a question. First, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. There's a lot of really good news here, given the true challenges the pandemic has laid out. I mean, this is an awfully good-looking budget considering. And this is not a big deal, but I do notice our police budget is down by a tad, maybe 2-3% in those 3 years. I'm just kind of wondering, was that something that we planned on, or is this something that we just kind of had foisted on us by circumstance?
Councilmember Goss, the police budget overall, what you're seeing is a shifting of the general fund. So when you see us using the COPS fund, for example, and draining that reserve balance down, then you won't see that in the police budget as it's presented. So we're not reducing expenditures on police overall, but for the one-time stuff, we're trying to find non-general fund sources this year.
I got you. Okay.
So we don't have to reduce service.
Good. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It was very good. And I agree with my colleagues. The budget looks pretty fantastic, all things considered. And my only question is the 3 FTE reductions. Am I right in that one of those is coming from library and the rest is coming from part-time reductions in community service and police?
That's correct, Councilmember Harabedian.
Okay. And so I always like to just kind of get in my head, are we going to see when we say an FTE is going to be eliminated from library, is that a person or is that just is that a combination of hours that amount to an FTE?
Councilmember Harabedian, in this case, it was a vacant position and it was also a combination of hours. Library, I forgot to mention when I said we wanted to add a position in admin services and the police department. Library is that third area that we want to make whole, but we want to wait until mid-year to look at that. And we're also aware right now, due to the closure with the Safer at Home and COVID, the library is an area that generally can have a little bit less staffing without a great deal of impact on the community. But that's an important FTE to add back in if our projections for revenue and expenditures hold true.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, first of all, just again, I commend you for, taking action immediately when the COVID crisis hit to just look at where we could save and knowing that that money will come in handy a little bit later. But one thing I didn't understand on your slide, Mr. City Manager, do you think you could put that up again? Because it kind of went through this pretty fast, but the projection of 3 years out when you said you're projecting a deficit. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, let me pull it back up real quick, Mayor. So what this is showing, what this slide is showing right here, it wasn't intended to show a deficit in 3 years. What this shows is that as we make cuts that are not permanent and that they have to be added back into the general fund, that your cuts become more dramatic, but the savings from those cuts are not realized with the same frequency. So by the time we get into year 3, what this is saying is if we're not managing our budget significantly differently, then even doing greater service reductions will yield less savings. And in year 3, we would actually have to make substantial cuts of $377,000 total to only lose 125,000 because we have to add back in the 500,000 from the cuts we've made before. So what we're trying to do is give council the ability to pull everything back in year one and realize all the savings we can with very limited service interruption, and then manage years 2 and 3 based on the savings that we accrue this year, as opposed to making further reductions.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, just a couple of questions. You're going to increase the utilities personnel by increasing part-time hours in one full-time position. I would think that, implementing our AMI now, that you'd have more savings there. So why are we adding utility workers?
There, the AMI is going to be a tremendous savings, and I should give a plug now. We're going to monthly billing beginning next month, which is great. What we have found with the number of leaks that we still have in the locations where they are at, that if we add part-time staff to supplement our full-time staff, that we are going to have a much more effective use of personnel, and we're not going to burn our team out as quick. So in most cities, when we talk about water operators, we picture the SCADA system, we picture people managing pumps and wells. That's not what happens here. As we know, most of our water pump operators, 50% of their job is digging 6 feet holes through concrete to fix repairs. And that is abnormal, but it also takes a tremendous physical and mental toll to be on call as an entire team over a 3 or 4 day weekend. So we're trying to supplement this with part-time staff. And that's also offered our team an opportunity for promotion in supervisory and management position. We actually promoted 2 people today who very well deserved. So you're seeing us try and move to having water operators that operate our water system, and then allowing people that don't have that very technical, refined skill set to repair our leaks.
Yeah, okay, great. It says you're also going to continue to invest in local transportation funding. What does that mean?
Let me see, let me pull up, which slide are you referring to, Mayor?
Well, it's not in your slide. This is in your staff report under capital budget. So your water funds are budgeted to invest 1.5 million.
Oh, that should probably say in our water main replacement program, Mayor. The 1.5 million is in the water main replacement for water.
But there's just a statement that says the city will continue to invest in local transportation funding in the annual citywide street reconstruction. I just didn't know what that meant.
That one, it means like the metro funds that we get for the citywide reconstruction projects.
I'm sorry.
We continue to do.
I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, so that means that we will continue to invest the metro funds, all the funding we get for that local transportation funding, to invest it in the street projects like we do every year. So that was a comment right there.
Oh, okay. That makes perfect sense.
Sorry, Mayor, I heard water. I don't know where that came from. I thought you said water.
It was just below the comment about water. Okay, so with water, 1.5 million in infrastructure, where do you see this the following year? Are we continuing that line upward?
Yes, Mayor, we're continuing with the water main replacement program and being aggressive on it. The reason we capped it at 1.5 this year is we are expecting a $1 million interest-free loan from our water district. And we will apply that towards infrastructure likely at mid-year. But both our fund balance and our cash in water is going to allow us to continue to be aggressive and complete as many projects as is possible during the year.
Yeah, okay. Excellent. Okay, then, all right, so that's all the questions I have. Are there any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, well, with that, again, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public to make any comment, any questions on our budget. And as usual, we'll wait a minute and let people call in.
Mr. Mayor, it does not look like you have any callers for public comment on this item.
Okay. It's two public hearings with no public. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. What comments do you have?
I'll just share that I think I stated it even when I prefaced my question, but I just want to commend the staff. Really, I mean, in these times and other colleagues that I have on different city councils, this is just not the same story that they're hearing. And considering the investments we've had to make into COVID and some of the changes we've had to make with our planning, it just is remarkable what we've been able to do. So thank you for that. I also appreciate the 6-month reevaluation. I mean, I'm itching to put more into the CalPERS. I mean, we really saw the results of that and the benefit we've been able to just realize because of the investments that we did early on. So hopefully we can do some of that. And then also the 3-year lookout, I think, has been extremely helpful also. So I hope it's a practice that we can continue doing.
So I do agree with Mayor Pro Tem very adamantly about when we can to move on the CalPERS. I think that's been an incredible innovation on our part. And obviously you and your staff deserve all the credit for that, Mr. City Manager. I do want to say this, every year I have to say this, this is a testament to what a very fiscally careful government we have when you, because I've done some research on zero-based budgeting since the last time I commented on it. And there are other government agencies that use it, but not near as effectively as ours. And what I've learned about zero-based budgeting is just about everything else human. Human institutions are only as good as the human leaders in those institutions. So zero-based budgeting is the reason why we have more flexibility. And I think we have leadership in our city staff right now that is serious about zero-based budgeting. And that makes all the difference. So once again, here we were a few months ago thinking, you know, the bottom was about ready to drop out. Other cities are laying people off and have plans to lay a lot more off. Their CalPERS debt is going up, 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 up. They're taking out bonds to pay off bond debt, to pay off CalPERS debt. And here we are with a surplus, and we've lost what, 1 FTE through a vacancy. It's amazing. It's just amazing. It really truly is a remarkable accomplishment. So kudos to you and your staff, Mr. City Manager. And I think we on the council ought to get a little bit of credit for being supportive of you, because you know, when that times get tough, I see other councils kind of gobbling each other up, and we just don't do that. So anyway, it's all good.
Yeah, and I'll echo those comments. Both my colleagues, extremely impressive. So the city manager very much appreciated all the hard work, and Director Garola, Leon, everything that you did also to obviously put this together. And look, I think that over the next couple of years, it's going to be critical to, as we will stay vigilant with the budget. And I think that we have a good platform and footing right now. And I just think it's going to be interesting to see what local government looks like going forward. And I think continuing to do what we do now, which is prepaying, the CalPERS debt obligations, is really key to that. But also continuing to aggressively invest in infrastructure when you have the funds to do so, and the excess funds, because those funds might not be as plentiful in the future, and that infrastructure needs to keep getting replaced. So I think that this is great, and I do think that we can never, lose sight on the infrastructure here in the city, the streets, the water mains, the sewers, et cetera, because those age regardless of what's going on in the economy and what's going on around us. So well done to everyone.
Okay, just one little thing. We are approving our fees for the year too. And in flipping through, I just saw a couple of things is that our design review permit, administrative design review, minor conditional use permit, and minor variance, the fees have doubled on those. What's the reason for that?
Mayor, on the fee schedule, as you know, is intended or can only be actually cost recovery. We've underwent dramatic changes to our processes, adding pretty serious regulations to what people have to go through to receive a design review permit. And because of the amount of regulation we have across the board, the fees reflect that. It takes a long time to approve some of these things because we have regulations in place that I think a lot of other cities don't have. So when we talk about fees, the easiest way to reduce fees is to reduce regulation.
Okay, thank you. Just one more comment on that because I'm looking at the general fund and planning and community preservation is our budget for the year is proposed to be $1 million. And how much of that entire budget comes from these fees that we take in for permitting and plan check and all that stuff? So what percentage of that $1 million expense is recovered through these fees?
So Mayor, I wouldn't have that number off the top of my head. A lot of our inspections, for example, have different cost recovery rates. So staff's happy to research that and provide a specific answer to you. I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head though.
Okay, that's fine. So, but your comment about regulation is appropriate here because in reviewing these fees and, I'm just going to say my eyes got open because I pulled permits to add a bathroom and I just could not understand why I had to pay $850 in permits to build within the four walls that exist. I'm not adding on to the house, And, we talked about this and Councilmember Harabedian knows this ever since we've been on the council. I mean, originally when we came on, our focus was in cost recovery. And I just remember even before I was on the council, one of the council members, Joe Mosca, just kept saying repeatedly, the fees are too high, the fees are too high. We come on and say, well, those that are applying, we need to recover the cost from them. We don't want to subsidize from the general public here. And it really never occurred to me until today after you and I talked, Mr. City Manager, that the key to lowering the fees is to lower the costs. And you've been so good at lowering costs in other areas, and I would just like to propose that you take a look at that sometime this year. And again, I'm very sensitive to the conditions that you're working under right now. And, you're doing way more than I think anybody can expect of you. But I really think that's something we should look at as to how do we get the costs down? What kind of work or what kind of things are we doing that is putting this burden on people that are trying to make improvements to their home? So we can talk about that again, but I would just like to hear comments from the council on, what you think about that, because you look at this stuff, I mean, it just costs a fortune just to apply for a project,
Mr. Mayor, you are singing my song tonight. I couldn't agree with you more. And if a subcommittee's ever developed to try to help the city manager or his staff, I'd love to volunteer for it.
Yeah, I think that the reality is, and it has always been, not just in Sierra Madre, a lot of folks are just not going to pull permits because they're so expensive. And I think that's the reality, it's a catch-22, is that, you make them high enough to recover all costs, which inevitably makes people just say, well, I'm going to take the risk and do it without pulling the permits, because frankly, I don't want to put another 5 to 10% onto a budget that's already too high. So I think that this is a realistically challenging scenario, and it always has been. And I don't think we've ever been that effective at balancing the cost recovery, because of course you can always just not recover full cost, with incentivizing folks to actually pull permits. Because I'd say the majority of folks, well, I don't know. I would hope that the majority of folks are still pulling permits, but I think that there's a fair amount that are probably still not. And I'm not sure if we lower it, what percentage or how much we have to materially lower it to where we get, most if not all people pulling them. And so I think it's a good point by the mayor, and I'm sure we're all in unison here. It should be, we want to make people's lives easier here, to improve their properties, improve their property values, while doing it safe. And that's the whole thing about a permit, is to make sure that they aren't doing something outside the bounds of the law, so that they're putting themselves and their family or their neighbors at risk with something they're doing to their building. So I think we need to keep that in mind. In some ways, permit, it'd be a radical idea, but maybe you make it free for a period of time, just so more people are getting used to doing it, and you're making sure it's being done right. And even though we are, as a city, subsidizing it, I think maybe you value safety and the adequacy of the project over cost recovery, because I think oftentimes you're sacrificing the former for the latter. So I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, but I think the mayor, and all of us, all four of us here, have talked about this at length. I think that it's something that we haven't, I don't think, effectively balanced, because I don't think any government does. So I'm in agreement.
Okay, Councilmember Arismendi, any comments on that?
I'm fine to revisit it, but I'm hoping we could pass this tonight as is.
Yeah. Okay, and part of it isn't just the permits, but just the review process, how we really drag our clients through this to just get the project approved right from the get-go before they even pull permits. So, okay. All right, well, anyway, the exciting thing about the budget is that that surplus that we have, that is considerably over our target of 25% of expenditure. So that's another topic that we ought to discuss this year, is any of that money, is it appropriate to invest not only in, continuing to pay down our CalPERS obligation, but are there other things that we should be investing in the city that either improve the quality of life for the city, or put us in a better position to keep costs low in the future by spending the money now? So that's just another topic of discussion that I think we should have during this council, and just not leave that fun stuff to the next council. You know what I mean? So, the buildup of the reserves was on our watch, so we should have some say about how it gets spent. But again, that was always a goal when we came on. We wanted to make this better for future generations and future councils that don't have to make some of the tough choices that were made here. So,
good point, Mayor.
yeah. So with that, again, Mr. City Manager, thank you very much. Really excited about what you presented here. And this is good news for Sierra Madre. And I wish we were over the COVID crisis, because I know people would be marching up to the podium to praise the good work you've done if we didn't have to do it via conference call. So thanks for everything. So with that, we've got how many different resolutions? 1, 2, 3, 4 resolutions. So is there a motion to get them all in one fell swoop here?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 20-35, resolution 20-36, 20-37, and PFA resolution number 74.
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, can we call for the vote here?
Oh.
She's on mute. You're on, Madam City Clerk, you're on mute.
I apologize. Operator error. Mayor John Caposcia,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arismendi,
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Aye.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Yes.
The motion to approve Resolution 2035, Resolution 2036, Resolution 2037, and PFA Resolution number 74 was approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, next item is a discussion item. Consideration of adoption of Resolution 20-39, authorization to have mayor sign cooperation agreements for the City of Sierra Madre's participation in the Community Block Grant Program.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Analyst Carlson. This item this evening is a recommendation that the City Council adopt Resolution 20-39 and authorize the mayor to sign cooperation agreement for the city's CDBG program. This is a relatively straightforward item that comes before the City Council every 3 years. It does not pertain to our current CDBG programs, including the Small Business Loan Program, which will be discussed in the special meeting. It simply allows us to continue to participate in the CDBG program for the next 3 years. The city has utilized CDG funding primarily to address ADA compliance projects in the past, such as automatic doors, playground surfaces, and corner sidewalk curb cuts. And now with the COVID emergency, has been able to use the funding for various assistance in response to the community needs. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt Resolution 20-39 and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement for the continued participation in the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. All right, what questions?
None for me.
Okay, seeing none, we will just open it up for public comment. Any comments for the public? We will wait a minute and let you call in if you have a comment.
Mr. Mayor, it does not appear that you have any public comment callers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any discussion on the topic? Seeing none, we have a motion. Oh, we don't need a motion, do we? No. Oh, we do. Yes. Okay. We do need a motion.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk.
Caposha,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi.
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Here.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Yes.
The motion to approve Resolution 2039 and authorize the mayor to sign the cooperation agreement for the City of Sierra Madre's continued participation in the Community Development Block Grant Program was passed by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, so we've just completed all our agenda items. Are there any suggestions for a future item? Okay, so we're going to then adjourn this meeting and immediately reconvene a special meeting. But I would like to just adjourn the meeting in memory of Phyllis Chapman, who died about 2 weeks ago. And I didn't know her well, but she was one of the remarkable people that have made Sierra Madre what they are, and was very interested in historic preservation and led to the actual creation of our preservation society to help to preserve our old homes, leading to implementation of Mills Act in Sierra Madre. And you know, just as time goes on here, there's fewer and fewer of us that know some of the really old timers that really made a big impact on Sierra Madre. And now a new generation is coming up that probably never knew Phyllis or knew about her. And it's kind of sad because we just have such a rich history in Sierra Madre here. So again, I would like to just adjourn the meeting in her memory. So with that, I don't think we need a motion. We'll adjourn, and immediately I will call for opening a special meeting to discuss our local community block grant program that we're implementing for the COVID. So we are open.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll turn it over to Management Analyst Carlson to give an update on the program application and when we expect to expend our first funds in the form of grants to businesses.
Good, thank you, City Manager. This evening's sole item for the special meeting is a recommendation that the City Council authorize expenditures not to exceed $141,280 in CDBG funds for the COVID-19 Small Business Grant Program. Staff has received a number of qualifying applications at this point, with a number of additional qualified applications anticipated in the next several days. Staff would like to issue the assistance checks in the amount of $3,000 and avoid waiting an additional 2 weeks. The $3,000 figure was set as a result of the popularity of the program, demonstrated by over 50 applications. In consultation with the Chamber of Commerce, it was decided to award the funds evenly over all of the qualifying applicants. Also, this program has been set up so that it can be used going forward with any additional funding from any source, wherever it might come from. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so this is just the money that's going to each of the individuals that applied. Who funds the decks that we're building in the streets for the businesses? How is that paid for?
Sure, that was funded outside entirely outside of CDBG funds, and I can let City Manager Gabe indicate exactly where those came from.
Mayor, those were the funds the council approved, the $35,000 at the last meeting for the Alfresco Sierra Madre Cares Initiative.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm sorry, I just forgot that. But that's great. I just want to say again, because I remember saying it before, I'm just very proud that we're able to do that to help our restaurants. And so far, it just looks fabulous what we're seeing in front of Casa del Rey, where every night they've got every table filled. And I see the other one is complete now in front of the Delirium. Is that right? Okay, and you're working now on the one in front of Corfu, right?
That's correct, Mayor. And then the final deck will be in front of the only place in town.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, that's the only question I have.
Real quick question, James, you referred to not going to council. I thought we had to go to council in 2 weeks. I mean, I'd prefer if we could approve it here. What's the process there?
Well, yeah, we decided that we would ask for authorization to begin the payment. You will go through, all of these payments will go through the regular process with the warrants in 2 weeks, so you'll have that too. We were hoping that you would give us the authorization to start delivering these grants now, but we can wait if you need us to.
I don't want to wait. I am glad we don't have to wait 2 weeks if we don't have to.
Okay, any other questions? All right, one more time, we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public that's listening care to comment on the grants to the businesses using the Community Development Block Grant funding?
Mr. Mayor, I am not seeing any callers for public comment.
Okay, I know they're all at home just cheering in front of their TV that we're able to do this for our local businesses, but that's okay if you didn't want to call in. Okay, so with that, any other discussion? Okay,
I
let's.
think this is fantastic. I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment. I apologize. For some reason, I thought this was closed session, so I apologize.
No, this is open session, right?
Yeah, I realize that now. I was being so informal, so I apologize.
What if I had it wrong? Okay.
I couldn't tell, yeah.
Okay, Madam City Clerk.
Mayor John Caposha,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rochelle Arizmendi,
Aye.
Councilmember Jean Goss,
Aye.
Councilmember John Harabedian.
Aye.
The motion to authorize the expenditure of up to $141,280 in community redevelopment block grant funds for the COVID-19 small business grant program is approved as proposed.
Okay, with
Here,
that,
here.
thank you very much. So, okay, we'll just adjourn. We're done. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.